Welcome to this online course content that supports preparing to take the Maryland Tree Expert exam. The supplemental presentation to the study guide is intended to aid those individuals who are preparing to take the Maryland Tree Expert exam as required by the Maryland Tree Expert licensing law. Anyone seeking to practice or advertise tree care services in the state of Maryland must obtain this license from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. This presentation corresponds to the information in the online study guide. The text of the study guide, version 5.1, may be found at dnr.maryland.gov/forest. Click on the Urban and Community Forestry tab at the top of the page, and then Tree Expert Law in the menu on the left-hand side of the website. Maryland Tree Expert Exam Study Guide version 5.1, Chapter 4, Pruning. Pruning operations should start with the question why. Pruning objectives should be established prior to beginning any pruning operation. Pruning is defined as the selective removal of plant parts. The objective of your pruning is to produce strong, healthy, attractive plants. Specifications for pruning are to include the location and size of parts to be removed, the pruning objective, and the pruning type that will be employed. Here is a pruning specification workflow or flow chart. First, establish your pruning objectives. Then, establish the pruning type to be used to meet those objectives. For instance, raising the crown, reducing the crown, thinning the crown, or cleaning the crown. Then specify the plant locations to be removed and specify the size or range of plant parts to be pruned. Equipment and work practices that damage living tissue and bark beyond the scope of work should be avoided. Climbing spurs shall not be used when climbing and pruning trees, except under special circumstances noted in the ANSI A300 pruning standards. These include when limbs are more than a throw line apart with no other means of climbing the tree, when there is thick outer bark so that the cambium will not be damaged, in remote utility rights-of-way situations, and of course during emergencies. Branches with strong U-shaped attachment should be retained, while branches with V-shaped attachment and included bark should be removed. Branch attachments with included or ingrown bark are often found on trees with V-shaped crotches, codominant stems, and sharp-angled branch attachments. A pruning cut that removes a branch at its point of origin shall be made close to the trunk or parent branch without cutting into the branch bark ridge or collar and without leaving a stub. A pruning cut that reduces the length of a branch or parent stem should bisect the angle between its branch bark ridge and an imaginary line perpendicular to the branch or stem. To prevent damage to the parent limb when removing a branch with a narrow branch attachment, the final cut should be made from the outside of the branch inward. If a limb is large enough that the cambium may rip during pruning, it should be removed by making 3 cuts. The first cut eliminates the chance of bark tearing as the limb is removed. The second cut allows the limb to drop smoothly when the weight is released. The third cut removes the remaining stub. Severed limbs should be removed from the crown of the tree upon completion of the pruning, at the end of the workday, or at times when the tree will be unattended. When necessary, ropes or other equipment shall be used to lower large branches or portion of branches to the ground. Limbs that cannot be safely controlled by hand or free dropped shall have a separate rigging line tied to them to help control their fall. Flush cuts that impact branch collar can cause ring shakes or cracks, discolored wood, and a greater risk of decay. Wound treatment should not be used to cover wounds or pruning cuts. Topping is defined by ANSI A300 as the reduction of tree size by cutting live branches and leaders to stubs without regard to long-term tree health or structural integrity. Topping is not an acceptable pruning practice. Topping is not an alternative term for crown reduction, directional pruning, or drop crotch pruning, or lateral pruning, and is different from pollarding. Topping has been shown to increase the risk of tree failure. A heading cut is defined as the reduction of a shoot, stem, or branch back to a bud or lateral branch not large enough to assume the terminal role. Heading should be considered an acceptable practice for shrub pruning and specialty pruning, but not for other types of pruning. For most conifers, if branches are headed back to older wood with no foliage, the branch stub usually dies. Cutting back to a lateral that is insufficient in size is much like topping. To meet the defined pruning objective, the growth cycle of the species, the structure of the species, and the type of pruning to be performed should be considered. The Maryland Forest Service requires that not more than 25% of the foliage on a mature tree should be removed within a growing season. Not more than 25% of the foliage of a branch or limb should be removed in a single growing season when it is cut back to a lateral. That lateral should be at least 1/3 the diameter of the removed portion so that it can assume apical dominance. Excessive removal of the laterals and foliage from the interior portion of a branch is called lion's tailing. The negative effects of lion's tailing include reduced branch taper, sunburned bark tissue, and weakened branch structure and breakage. Topping and lion's tailing are considered unacceptable practices for pruning trees. In the following series of slides, the following pruning types will be covered: structure pruning, crown cleaning or deadwooding, crown thinning, crown raising or elevation, crown reduction through lateral direction or drop crotch pruning, crown restoration, pollarding, vista, and espalier. Structural pruning is the selective removal of live branches to improve tree and branch architecture, primarily on young or medium-aged trees. The size and location of leaders or branches to be subordinated or removed should be specified. The dominant leader should be selected for development, and strong, properly spaced scaffold branch structure should be selected and maintained by reducing or removing other branches. Interfering, overextended, defective, weak, and poorly attached branches should also be removed or reduced. Crown cleaning is the selective removal of dead, diseased, detached, and broken branches. The location of parts and the size range of parts shall be specified. Crown thinning is the selective removal of live branches to reduce crown density. Thinning should result in an even distribution of branches on individual branches and throughout the crown. The percentage of foliage, the location and size of parts to be removed shall be specified. Crown raising is the selective removal of branches to provide vertical clearance. The location and size of the parts to be removed should be specified. The clearance distance shall also be specified. After pruning, the ratio of live crown to the total tree height should be at least 2/3. Crown reduction is the selective removal of branches and stems to decrease the height and or spread of a tree. Consideration shall be given to the ability of a species to tolerate this type of pruning. The location of parts to be removed and the clearance requirements shall be specified. This method, sometimes called drop crotch pruning, results in a more natural appearance, increases the time before pruning is needed again, and minimizes stress on the tree. Crown reduction should be accomplished with reduction cuts, not heading cuts. Crown restoration consists of selective removal of branches, sprouts, and stubs to redevelop structure, form, and appearance of trees that have been either severely pruned, vandalized, or damaged. The location and size range of parts and the percentage of sprouts to be removed should be specified. Pollarding is a tree training system that involves severe heading the first year, followed by annual sprout removal. Pollarding is not topping. Management plans shall be made prior to the start of the pollarding process for routine removal of the sprouts. Consideration shall be given to the ability of the individual tree to respond to pollarding. Vista pruning consists of the use of one or more pruning methods to enhance a specific line of sight, such as the view for this lake. Pruning methods shall be specified. The size range of parts, location in the tree, and the percentage foliage to be removed should be specified. Espalier is the combination of pruning, supporting, and training branches to orient a plant in one plane. Ties should be replaced as needed to prevent girdling the branches at the attachment site. In this photograph, it's being used to create a living fence at the American Horticultural Society headquarters office in Alexandria, Virginia. We hope you found this supplemental presentation to be helpful as you prepare for the tree expert exam. This concludes Chapter 4, Pruning. Please proceed to Chapter 5, Problem Diagnosis.